President Trump taking matters into his own hands after a stimulus stalemate kept much-needed assistance from struggling Americans. But Democrats were quick to take issue with his executive orders.
Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer have chosen to hold this vital assistance hostage on behalf of very extreme partisan demands.
The president's meager, weak, and unconstitutional actions further demand that we have an agreement.
So what should Americans expect from these orders and from more potential negotiations? Here to break it all down, senior fellow at the National Taxpayers Union, Mattie Duppler. Mattie, thanks so much for being here. Let's review these executive actions once again. We're going to pop them up on the screen, and I will read them. They begin with extending federal unemployment benefits at $400 a week. Then they continue deferring payroll tax through the end of 2020 for Americans earning less than $100,000, deferring student loan payments, and extending the moratorium on evictions. Was this the right move?
Well, I think that the president took action that is very much needed for Americans, given that we've had tens of millions of Americans lose their jobs over the course of these shutdowns. Now, let's break it down a little bit. So with the student loan payments, not only did he defer payments, but he also set the student loan interest rate at 0%. So for those who did not lose their jobs, they've now got an opportunity to pay some of that money back at an expedited way. Beyond that, directing federal agencies to prevent evictions for Americans, I think makes a lot of sense given the unique circumstances that we're in right now. The question of the UI payments, this has been the sticking point for Congress on the negotiations on the Hill. Democrats have been unwilling to budge, demanding billions and billions of dollars in spending on things unrelated to the COVID crisis. The president taking action on UI, I think, demonstrates that he has his eyes focused on what's happening in November. Americans are going to see this, and they're going to see that the president has taken action as Congress dithers. That's really going to be, I think, a helpful effort for the president as he moves closer to November. Now, when it comes to this tax payment and the stimulus on the payroll tax cut, I think the president is getting bad advice here. This is something that Americans likely won't see show up in their pocketbooks. Because remember, if you've gotten a paycheck before, you know that your employer is responsible for withholding that. The president has limited powers when it comes to taxation. He can't force employers to give that tax payment back to American workers. So the amount of stimulus that Americans are going to get out of that tax payroll deferral, I think, will probably be limited as a result of that.
Okay, let's talk about that, because for the payroll tax cut, that includes Medicare and Social Security. You pay part of that, but your employer pays part of that. Are you saying the person who's making less than $100,000 a year is not going to see any relief the moment this thing is enacted?
Well, listen, the president can only defer that payroll payment, and employers are the ones who are responsible for taking that payroll tax out of workers' paychecks. So if employers don't have any kind of assurance that they're not going to be liable for that payment at the end of the year when this deferral expires, they would be smart to hang on to that money to make sure that they've got cash on hand if, in fact, it is the case that that payroll tax deferral isn't forgiven at the end of the year. So you're an employer, you're trying to make ends meet during these uncertain times. I don't see employers giving that money back to workers as a result, because they don't have the assurances they need that they won't be on the hook for that payment at the end of the year. This is why it makes sense that we need Congress to act when it comes to relief for Americans. Employers need that certainty right now, not just on the payroll tax deferral, but on the multitude of other elements that they're fighting when it comes to the coronavirus crisis. Employers right now are really trying to see through the next weeks, months, and maybe even years. They need certainty from Congress in order to do that.
Mattie, 15 seconds remaining. From a negotiation perspective, does this force the Democrats' hand in any way, or are they going to stick to their guns on this?
Oh, I think that clip you heard from Nancy Pelosi demonstrates that Democrats are getting nervous now that the president has moved. He's shown Americans he's committed to delivering relief. Congress needs to get its act together and actually get that relief to Americans for it to make an impact.
Mattie Duppler, I love talking taxes. You love talking taxes and all the stuff that goes along with it. This was fun. We appreciate your time this morning. Jillian, over to you.
Thanks, Todd. Have a good morning.